want to start off with a l'chaim. So Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiyeh b'dvari. This evening's gathering, I'd like to dedicate this to a refuah shlema, a speedy recovery, for a couple of friends of ours. So Rabbi David ben Chaya Rivka, Rabbi Vigdor Shlomo ben Chaya Reiza, and a Gershon ben Yakovina should have, and all those who need a refuah shlema should have a quick refuah shlema. B'karav, l'chaim, chaim. We want to start off the evening with the blessings for the menorah and a couple of songs. So I'm going to ask Rabbi Wolf and the representatives of the Lubavitch Boys Choir, of the Lubavitch Boys Cheder Choir in Chicago, to ask them to start off. And if you have a setting, you can set your pictures on speaker view. That means whoever's speaking will be in the front and center, the full view of your picture there. So you'll be able to see some of the boys a little bit better if you set on speaker view. And again, welcome on board, everyone. And now off to the boys choir. Amen. Amen.
So Yeshua Lechano Lishabeya Tito Beistefi Lecham Nodameya Liezati Madeya Victor Hanabeya Azekor Yeshir Lizmor Chanukah Sat Lizbeya Azekor Yeshir Lizmor Chanukah Sat Lizbeya. Oh, dreidel, 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 I made you out of clay, and when it's dry and ready, oh, dreidel, oh, dreidel, 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 I made you out of clay, and when it's dry and ready, oh, dreidel, I shall play. Oh, little dreidel, I made it out of clay. When it's dry and ready, oh, dreidel, I shall play. Oh, dreidel, 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 I made you out of clay. Now when it's dry and ready, oh, dreidel, I shall play. One more?
Absolutely.
One more. Oh, Chanukah, Chanukah, come light the menorah. Let's have a party, we'll all dance around. Gather around the table, let's celebrate. Say we want to play and laugh to eat. And while we are singing, the candles are burning low. One for each night they let us be light to remind us of days long ago. One for each night they set us be light to remind us of days long ago.
Beautiful. Yay. Yasher Koyach. Yasher Koyach. Thank you.
Happy Chanukah, everyone.
Happy Chanukah. Happy Hanukkah.
Feilach Chanukah. Thank you much. Very good. Well, Baruch Hashem, we are now up to about 19 participants in the evening. And I want to thank the Boys Choir for joining us. The guest speaker this evening is an old friend of mine. This is Chaplain Colonel Shmuel Felzenberg. He is currently the deputy commandant of the Chaplain Center and School. He is a veteran of 3 combat deployments, 12 months in Iraq in 2004, over 12 months in Afghanistan in 2007, and back again in 2014 for another 9 months in Afghanistan. He also had a deployment of 30 days in Kuwait back in 2013, total of about 34 months of deployment in all. We will hopefully have a brief Q&A session at the end of his presentation. So if you want to gather some questions and have them ready to go, please feel free. But with no further ado, I'd like to introduce an old friend, Colonel Felzenberg.
How are you, Reb Grossman? Good evening and a happy Hanukkah to everybody. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, got it. So I just want to start off with a couple things. First, with a public thanks to God for allowing us to have this opportunity. Of course, that is in part the theme of Hanukkah. Thank you very much for the very generous introduction. So let me peel back the onion a little bit and tell you how long I know Rabbi Grossman for. I would venture to say it's been about 41 years. So we go back a minute. And I thank him very much for inviting me for this evening's event. Just a show of hands. I know you're all on mute. A show of hands. Who in the audience is a veteran? Wow, impressive. And I have to take my hat off for a minute amongst the honorable congregation of veterans in front of me. Rabbi, Chaplain, Colonel Retired Brett Oxman has also joined the fray. So before him, I am humbled, and he has many more years even of service in the past than I, although in the Air Force, not the Army. But again, for everyone, again, thank you for joining us this evening. And I'll just share a few reflections. In addition to how long I know Reb David, and I know he has started the Institute of Jewish Chaplaincy. My time in the Army has lasted over 21 years thus far. As mentioned, I'm stationed at the U.S. Army Chaplain Center and School. Funny enough, from the introduction, I realize now that I've spent more time overseas than just about at any one duty station over that time. Afghanistan seems to be a personal favorite, sending me back time and again. Can't get enough of Bagram, Afghanistan. In any event, just for everyone, let me just open with a couple remarks. We'll share a few war stories, some reflection, and as mentioned at the end, we'll do some Q&A. So for all the Jewish service members of the U.S. Armed Forces, regardless of branch of service, both those past, namely the veterans, as well as those who presently serve, wherever they may be around the world, stateside and abroad, we wish you all a happy Hanukkah. And again, for all the veterans, we are truly humbled by those who've come before us and those who paved the way. We all know the U.S. military is the most respected institution and revered institution in the U.S. And many of you have had the privilege to serve bravely and on point in service and in support of our country and as representatives of the Jewish community while doing so. Fighting to thwart the hand of evil and persevering to promote freedom around the world, you are indeed, to use the Hanukkah term, modern-day Maccabees, the heroes of the Hanukkah story who fought against all odds to vanquish tyrannical oppression and restore and ensure religious freedom. And indeed, what message could be more American than that of religious freedom and the freedom to worship and or exercise one's faith as seen fit. This is what service members do on a regular basis, reliably and honorably so. The Jewish community cannot be more proud of those who serve, both now and in the past, and thank each and every one for their service and selfless sacrifice. Never fear, indeed, because no matter how daunting the task is, no matter how powerful the enemy or how difficult the mission, we always have to take to heart that a little light, using again the Hanukkah theme, can dispel much darkness. Such is the lesson of the ancient Hanukkah candles that we light even till this very day. And furthermore, we light these candles in increasing number, starting at 1 and working up to 8, going and increasing from day to day throughout Hanukkah, symbolizing that we must always be on the rise and on the increase, going from strength to strength, adding more light to dispel indeed that much more darkness. Those who serve bring the light of freedom to those oppressed around the world. We pray that this year's Hanukkah holiday is indeed one of joy and celebration for each and every one, both on the screen and for those who serve around the world. As Jews, indeed, we are tasked to be a light unto the nations as we strive and pray for a world redeemed speedily in our days. In fact, it is a very special time of year when families around the world are gathered to celebrate their holidays. Jews are no different. This is our time for Hanukkah. For the Jewish people, it's a significant time as we commemorate the historical events, how a small group can make a big difference, fighting for our freedom, fighting for the right to practice and observe and fulfill the Torah as commanded to us and as we see fit. We appreciate the many miracles, large and small, indeed, that have graced our lives over the generations, given to us by Almighty God. And we must recognize that the most meaningful among them is indeed our religious freedom. Hanukkah is a story, not just of the miracle of the battles and a miracle of the oil, but just as importantly, it's a story of the perseverance and determination of a people, the Jewish people, defending their religious freedom against tyranny and against all odds. And indeed, that is the name Hanukkah, comes from the word dedication. We have to remember that continually we have to dedicate ourselves to the importance of adhering to our faith, being dedicated to our country, and to remain dedicated and steadfast in the pursuit of religious freedom. The lights of Hanukkah are more than just simply a reminder of what happened back then, but are meant to provide inspiration, illumination for all things good moving forward, both in our present lives and in the years ahead. A few experiences that I've had in my service, where David, again, was kind to enumerate where I've been when, Iraq, Afghanistan, Kuwait, and other places therein. Partly what probably makes some of these experiences most unique and memorable was the travel in and out of theater. Some of the action I saw, some of the experiences I had, some of the places I've been, as unique as they are, one notably stands out. My very first deployment in 2004, early January, we convoyed, I was in an engineer unit, and we convoyed in, flew into Kuwait and then convoyed into Iraq. We were headed to Balad, which was a support area known as Anaconda. And as we were convoying in, I remember we came in contact, came under fire, of some sort or another. It was an extremely large convoy. I think to date it had been the largest to enter the theater, and it was substantial in its length. Not a few vehicles, but a few hundred vehicles. And so it's a little hard to tell exactly what's going on, but we were all ordered to dismount. Myself, a first deployment, first movement to contact with an enemy. I can tell you, it's an eye-opener, and can be an experience, and can separate, as they say, the men from the boys. But I also have to tell you is that it's at moments like that that you truly learn the power of prayer, and know that the one above hears prayer, both personal as well as the recitation of psalms and the like. And it is forever emblazoned in my memory, the experience of suddenly, without knowledge at the second, wondering why all the inhabitants suddenly started scattering. And that was because, from my vantage point, nestled under a Humvee, I could not immediately see, but within seconds came into view two U.S. Army Apache helicopters over the horizon in the early dawn morning light. And that is indeed an exceedingly beautiful picture to imagine against the rising sun in the background, and especially when you're witnessing this happen from underneath a vehicle for your own protection. Truly within seconds, all the local populace scattered. We were able to remount a few minutes later and continue on with our mission. I'm sure many folks here have notable combat stories, experiences that many others, including those who serve today, would be hard pressed to match. So I just want to acknowledge that the few little snippets that I'm sharing are not meant in any way as bragging rights, because I'm sure myself and others would be humbled before the people assembled before me. In any event, some of my other memorable experiences include the extensive travel in theater. Traveling in theater is always unique. trying to get from one place to another on both very small fixed wing aircraft as well as helicopters, traveling for purposes of both visiting my troops as well as Jewish coverage. When I was in Afghanistan, traveling from Bagram to Kandahar and other small forward operating bases. When I was in Iraq, going to the embassy, which at the time was known as the Coalition Provisional Authority Palace, and back to Balad and elsewhere. That was always a unique experience. However, late in that first deployment in 2004, in probably I would say late October, early November, I received an invitation from the White House to attend and officiate for President Bush at the time, the White House menorah lighting, as commonly happened. President Trump had one just a couple days back, and it was a unique thing, obviously, to be invited. Did not expect it, did not see it coming, and reality is I was hard pressed to come up with the right answer. But a few minutes of reflection, a call to my wife, and it was decided that I would have no recourse but to politely and respectfully decline the commander-in-chief. There I was overseas. The unit had absolutely no problem with redeploying me, but seeing as our deployment was January to January, and we were just a month plus away from going home, I figured there was nothing more important than my mission with the troops downrange. So I respectfully declined the presidential invite. However, the fun and games did not end there. The good news was that while I did not get to go to the White House, it was decided that an invitation would be extended to my family, my wife and 6 children. And indeed, they went to the White House, and it was the third night of Hanukkah, and my eldest 3 had the opportunity to light and officiate for President Bush. A truly unique opportunity for, at the time, a bunch of young, my oldest was just then bar mitzvahed, but for a bunch of young children to be able to do that is a rare experience, not experienced by many. But it gets even more fun, because while I did not get to go back for the White House, I traveled to the Capitol, went to Baghdad, to the CPA, Coalition Provisional Authority Palace, again, later known as the Embassy. And one of the things I did, in addition to the program I had planned, a menorah lighting and everything, was to have potato latkes. So you have to understand the challenge. Here I am in theater, resources are slim, having access to a small propane burner, even more challenging to come by. Thank God for instant latke mix. But what I can tell you is that we had a Hanukkah celebration and menorah lighting right there in the palace. Very interesting to experience, with the murals on the wall depicting Scud missiles aimed at Israel, other things that the palace, with all its regal bearing, presented. To see that and officiate Hanukkah just months after the capture of Saddam Hussein. But the highlight of the night for me was, while I was preparing the latkes during the meal part of the program, I proceeded to literally almost burn the place down. My propane stove was too close to the extremely long, probably 20, 25 feet in length, drapes, velvet drapes that hung over the windows in the palace. Thankfully, catastrophe was averted, but I will tell you, never in my life, to include while being under that Humvee, did my heart beat that fast for fear of what the repercussion would have been. But an interesting standout experience it was, but all was well. A few years later, in 2011, while I was stationed at West Point, and my son also attended West Point, we had the pleasure to go to the White House yet again under President Obama. The opportunity was for me, as the Jewish chaplain at West Point, to bring the West Point Jewish Chapel Choir, made up of cadets, accompanied by myself and one other officer. And we went there, and again was able to support yet a second White House opportunity. Very, very rewarding, and a great ministry opportunity for the cadets, who had, again, what is often for many a unique once-in-a-lifetime experience. 2018, when I was stationed at the Pentagon, once again, I got a call that I did not expect, but I was thankful that I was able this time to accept it. President Trump had called and asked if I could officiate 2 years ago, the White House lighting. And in fact, I was shocked. One of my family members had pointed out that the picture that the White House used this year as their promo for the Hanukkah event was a picture of a hand in uniform lighting a menorah, and that was my hand from 2 years ago. And it is a humbling experience to be able to do anything like that. But I have to say that of everything I have experienced in 21 and a half plus years, there is probably nothing nearly as endearing and rewarding as supporting the troops downrange. Soldiers and sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, all of them alike serve uniquely and selflessly beyond the imagination of the average common American civilian. And when they are forward, especially in a combat setting, it is a unique and humbling experience, is all I can describe it. It is a humbling experience and honor to be able to serve. One of our former Jewish chaplains always had the little quip that it's better to support 1 in theater than 500 in garrison. Again, no knock on folks who are not deployed. Every soldier still spends, no matter what the preponderance of their time, stateside. And ministry, whether it's at Fort Hood, Fort Bragg, West Point, or other, is also each and every one. There is no such thing as a bad assignment. But when you are forward, as I know Rabbi Oxman and many of my fellow peers have been, whether it's in Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, different places throughout the world, to be able to serve and support and bring, as they say, God to soldiers and soldiers to God, or airmen or Marines, as the case may be, is indeed something that will live with me forever. Just a couple quick thoughts. We're in a quickly changing world. Things are happening. Just coming off, obviously, a time of unique transition and upheaval in our country. The world, you see now the beginnings of peace in the Middle East. In fact, just even tonight, my wife and I got a picture of my nephew who's learning in Gush in Israel. And this evening he is at the Kotel with an official representative from Dubai. So there's United Arab Emirate wearing the Arab headdress and everything, representing their government. And he is standing at the Kotel with a representative of a Arab country by his side, and going through whatever program and interaction that they are having. But it is indeed a sign that the world is making a marked shift. Even as we speak, also, there are rabbis in theater performing and supporting religious support for the service members, one in Kuwait, one in Afghanistan. And again, they are doing great things. It's my pleasure to be here with you this evening. I know Rabbi Oxman would be over there in a heartbeat if he could. And those memories will forever be ingrained, as they have both served to enrich my life and indeed humble me as I reflect on my service. So without any further ado, I'd like to open the floor and offer if there is any question or comment from the distinguished people in front of me.
So we'll open up for Mike for questions, and you can also put questions in the chat if you'd like to, and we can share those with the Colonel as well.
Yeah, what's the best part of being a chaplain in the military? I think you highlighted it, but maybe there's something else you forgot.
Honestly, I was going to make a couple jokes, but no, seriously, the single best thing for me, and again, I'll only speak Army, in general, when I answer, with all due respect, again, to all the other branches, I'll just use the term soldier or Army and let it be known that it's representative of them all. And will not mention the fact that Army beat Navy in this past week's football game. Will not mention that whatsoever. But the single highlight, honestly, is just the humbling privilege to be able to serve. When you join the chaplaincy, they ask why you want to be a chaplain. And a lot of chaplains highlight and talk about the calling that they have. I will tell you, my calling was a little unconventional from the start. I'll share it in a minute, but the end result is the same. Serving in uniform, to be able to be with the troops, and especially in a forward setting, is a unique opportunity. For me, that is that is the tip of the spear of religious ministry. The story, as it were, of my calling and how it came to be. I'm one of probably only a few chaplains who did not initially intend to be a chaplain. I wanted to serve. Long story short, went to a recruiter in Morristown, New Jersey. A rather large man approached me, asked if he could help. When I say rather large, I'm only 5'3", but by anyone's measure, he was rather large. And he took one look at me, and before I could answer, he says, "Did you go to the school up the street? Are you a rabbi?" And I said, "Yes." He says, "Ah, so you want to be a chaplain." And he was a recruiter, and it's obviously his job to help steer people into where they could best serve. I scarcely had a word with him at that point. My intent really was to probably join in an armor or infantry capacity. But he, being God's messenger for the day, had me pegged, and he called me out and said, "You, young man, need to be an Army chaplain." And as they say, the rest is history. So that also sticks with me, how God's providential hand working through a recruiter just at a random recruiting station led me to where I am today. So
There's a question in the chat box about how is it serving non-Jewish troops in a combat zone? Any thoughts?
How is it?
Any comments about serving non-Jewish troops in a combat zone?
Sure. Well, it proverbially they have the saying, "There's no such thing as an atheist in the foxhole," although maybe you could find one or two. But I will say is that the non-Jewish troops are absolutely appreciative of everything their chaplain, whether it be a rabbi or other, does for them. Obviously, though, as a chaplain, regardless of one's faith, every chaplain has an affiliated denomination where they hang their hat. And there are certain things, certain rites, certain rituals, certain observances, certain life cycle event things that I could not, for example, do for a non-Jewish service member. I have to link them up with or refer them to a chaplain of the appropriate faith who can do certain things. So there are certain limitations, obviously, and it works both ways. But the reward and the satisfaction of being able to help and fulfill, and again, bring God to soldiers and soldiers to God, particularly at a time where they're either in peril, under stress, in a state of duress, and have unique needs and challenges. During separation, service members sometimes can face marital challenges where problems may have existed but are exacerbated by the separation. They have their own separate fears and unique obstacles to overcome. So there is plenty to do just because I cannot wrap tefillin with a non-Jewish service member. And so it's a two-way street of rewarding experience, being able to help. And in turn, I think we all know people who give and help probably receive more in return. Any other question?
There's a note here. Thank you for your service. Is there any instance that stands out in dealing with a military person that brings you a smile?
There is. I mean, there are several, and it is unique. Oh, I won't mention names. Let me just say, and it's one thing that comes to mind. And again, they're all wonderful. Well, they're all rewarding experiences, some more wonderful than others. But one that truly made me smile that I still think of and almost laugh at today, going back to relatively early 2004, I did the first first Purim event in the CPA Palace just about 3.5 months after Saddam Hussein was captured. And that was truly, by the way, a unique experience. We had it we had our service in the throne room, read a Megillah. You have to realize this was just also new territory. You're dealing with someone who thought he was the reincarnation of Nebuchadnezzar with his two evil sons. I was wearing one of the ceremonial hunting hats that belonged to his son as I was reading the Megillah. And at that event, one of the people who participated who I had just met. Subsequently, I think I saw him in theater one more time. This was 2004. We had a great program. Fast forward 14 years. And as they say, no kidding, there I was. Where was I? I was in the lower level of the White House. I was in the restroom. We were preparing for the Hanukkah lighting, and we were kind of like in a holding pattern. And I decided quickly before the hour-long program kicked off to go to the restroom. Suddenly, in the restroom, I hear someone say, Rabbi Felsen. It was a lot of people, Rabbi Felzenberg. And in that awkward setting, I turn around. There was the individual who recognized me from the CPA Palace in Baghdad, who was seeing me again 14 years later in the White House restroom. And without identifying, let us just say he was a significant appointee of the president. Wow. And don't know who you're going to see, who you're going to impact in what way, and what he or she and you will become years later, and where your paths will cross. So the CPA Palace, a decade and a half later, the restroom at the White House, and it's just the divine providential stuff like that continues to make me smile and amazed at everything God brings our way.
There's a story of the immortal chaplains, is one that's extremely inspiring. Could you tell us how that story impacted your relationship with chaplains of other denominations?
Yeah. So the immortal chaplains were referring to the 4 chaplains of the U.S. Army transport ship Dorchester, who went down. And obviously there was a rabbi, 2 Protestants of varying faiths, and a Catholic priest. Most everyone is fairly familiar one way or another with that. A unique story of selfless sacrifice and brotherhood. You had 4 chaplains who were all pretty much fresh out of the queue, having graduated from chaplain school not long before. And there they were on that fateful night, again, bonded, as it were, for eternity. In that unique experience. I think that is something that has probably one way or another given every chaplain, at least every Army chaplain, reason to pause and think and consider those with whom we perform our ministry, those with whom we serve, again, Jew and Gentile alike. And if anyone is ever, as they say, caught in their own little web, it gives reason to think and reevaluate the need to support each other and network. The number of people that I have referred to another chaplain of a different faith, and those in turn who've brought the wayward, wandering, otherwise seemingly unaffiliated Jewish service member to me, so that I indeed can help plug them into an active program or provide an opportunity to put tefillin on, or whatever the need is. It truly is why chaplains in the Army focus on a pluralistic environment with cooperation between all the chaplains, all in support of the service member. It's not a competition. It's kind of like a relay race. We hand off from one to the other and undertake that holy task together.
There's a note here that they named a ship after a Jewish chaplain. When they conduct ship replenishment, they concluded each exercise with the playing of Hava Nagila. Do you know that story?
Yeah, actually, can I? I don't mean to cut in. I met my CO. He told me he was on that ship. He was the captain of the ship. I think it was the Bomberg. And so when they did, get the gas, whatever it was, the fuel, at the end of that exercise, they play Hava Nagila. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh yeah, no. So as knowledgeable as I may or may not be, I was not familiar with that story. If Rabbi Oxman, do you have familiarity with that story?
I'm afraid that's a new one on me as well.
No, I just want to say that my commanding officer, my ROTC unit, Jerome Martin, and that's the name here and there, he was on that ship. So when I first met him, he told me about that story. No,
that is indeed a unique story. Thank you very much for sharing and bringing that to light. So teaching me something is easy. Teaching Rabbi Oxman something with his vast knowledge and experience, that is quite a task. No.
Check with Irv.
Yeah. Very good. We'll enter that into the record books. Very good. So just another question or two, perhaps?
There was one about how do Gentile service members relate to a Jewish chaplain?
Ooh.
And we
So,
can open that up to each of the chaplains that's on the call if they'd like to.
Right. And you took the words right out of my lips. I was actually going to offer that first to Rabbi Oxman, and before I reflect. Rabbi Oxman, do you want to take a swing at that?
Well, throughout my career, I found that a chaplain's a chaplain, and really what the troops wanted. And I was fortunate to have a number of joint assignments. So I can say, regardless whether soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, they wanted a chaplain who could empathize and who loved them. One of my lines when I would have a subordinate chaplain somewhere who only focused in on an individual denomination or faith was, if you want to be a chaplain with so few slots, you have to love all God's children because God is the one who created us all. And if you're able to convey that type of sincerity, they relate to you very, very well. And occasionally, because of religious things, they might even seek you out. If their denomination, for instance, harshly or frown upon divorce, and understanding that wasn't in and of itself a sin, I found sometimes I was the individual choice. If it crossed that type of theological thing, but just in general, certainly in the combat environment, I would like to say I echo ditto. However, I can add my haskama, my agreement to everything Rabbi Felzenberg said regarding the privilege of serving alongside American heroes, American warriors in a combat environment. That's something that just can't be replicated in a civilian world. Not the feeling of fulfillment, of excitement, of a calling. And when you're, especially in that type of environment, your faith doesn't matter. You are a representative of the holy. And it's very meaningful for them just to have you there. Never made a difference to me. I was thrilled to be able to do Jewish things, but to me there was no difference. And I have to all the successful, wonderful chaplains I've worked with, it was the same with them. And I never saw anybody really worried about our denomination. Just were we there to help them understand that there's a connection with the Eibishter that we all achieve, and when we're trying to do the right thing for others.
Yeah, and to just dovetail onto what Rabbi Oxman had mentioned, echo all the experiences I've had is that a non-Jewish service member, myself being the Jewish rabbi, it has never impeded any type of dialogue, interface, relationship. Again, there are certain obvious limitations in terms of religious support, what I can do or what they're looking for. However, sometimes it also makes me, the Jewish chaplain, a non-threatening resource. If you have, for example, let's just say a Catholic service member with certain beliefs and things, a great example, divorce is not necessarily, looked upon the same way as it is within the Jewish faith. Going to the unit chaplain in the event that it was me often can afford a service member a different perspective, a safe place, as it were. One of the things that notably stands out is throughout my career, and especially when I was at the school as a student, at the chaplain school, was when different different chaplains of different faiths would often dialogue amongst themselves, and dare I say, they too would get into theological disputes or debates. The person that they would often turn to resolve them was who else? The rabbi. Because often it came down to a scriptural debate. How do you interpret, the book of Daniel, yada, 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 and so on and so forth. And so they figured that, of course, every rabbi knew the entire Chumash and the whole Tanakh by heart, Baal Peh, chapter, verse, inside out, with all the commentaries at his fingertips. Sadly, that is not true. I may have at least some modest knowledge, but at least the beauty is having and knowing where to go for the answers, how to look up and to give the proper response that was needed to help resolve whatever their challenge was. I always found it unique how chaplains of other faiths with whom I had zero experience going into the Army, suddenly I often became the person they turned to, not because I was better looking or because I was so intellectually brilliant, but rather because they somehow had a respect for the rabbinate and assumed you can resolve our difficulty. So it is unique. If anything, it facilitated ministry. It did not, that religious discrepancy did not inhibit ministry.
On the flip side of that question, comes the question of anti-Semitism in the military over the generations. I've spoken with some folks who, one of my contacts was the graduating class of the Air Force Academy back in 1959, which was still a time when Jews had to attend church on Sunday because that's what everyone had to do. And things have changed over the years. Could you speak a little bit towards that question?
Sure. And that's one thing also, I'll go first here, but also let Rabbi Oxman, again, because he also spans a little more time in his service, having recently retired, but again, putting well over 30 years of service in, and also he has the experience in the Air Force, so I dare not even try and think to talk for one of the other branches. The Army now, again, I've been in 21 years. I personally have never seen or been a part of or victim of anything that I would label anti-Semitism. Is there invariably some people somewhere, somehow, hatred or ignorance in someone's heart that they're not necessarily a lover of their fellow man or woman? Dare I say yes. However, my experience over the last just over 20 years in the Army has been extremely clean. I'm not trying to whitewash anything. There is nothing that I personally can look back on in 21 years and say that I or any of the service members I directly supported were a victim of or a target of anti-Semitism. And I can tell you now that even over the last few years, religious discrimination has a absolute zero tolerance in the U.S. Army chaplaincy. Any type of discrimination based on religion, amongst others, other forms of discrimination, meets with an extremely stiff response. The Army, when it comes to religious accommodation, not discrimination, but accommodation, perhaps leads all the services and has stepped up its game, notably so, across a whole spectrum of religious requirements. There's even now a path to be able to request the beard. There is, over the last 15, 20 years, huge leaps forward in terms of kosher food, the access to being able to order, even in the field, strictly kosher for Passover, shelf-stable meals, Seder kits. You can deploy, and with the swipe of a government credit card, your unit can order you, under this most strict religious supervision, a Seder kit, Passover meals that are non-gebrux, meals that are glak kosher and or chalav Yisrael. It is just something that the greatest generation of World War II or those who fought in Korea and Vietnam could not even fathom what we are somewhat spoiled by. Now, I will say they may not be truly, gourmet cuisine dining experiences. However, compared to either not having or what maybe existed decades back, it is a notable leap forward. And indeed, I'd say the service members are not only thankful, but somewhat humbled that the services, Army in particular here I'm referring to, have made those accommodations, have made discrimination such a non-negotiable that is not tolerated. But I'll turn it over to my colleague, Rabbi Oxman. He can maybe talk from the Air Force and also from a broader historical standpoint that precedes me by well over 10 to 12 years.
So my experience, spans the time when you were not allowed to wear a kippah in uniform. I guess you could say I sort of started out by defying regulations from day one. It shows you that Hashem's got a sense of humor, because I managed to get promoted all the way despite myself. And my wife bought dehydrators and used to dehydrate turkey for me so that I could deploy with a big bag of turkey jerky to be able to have something to eat for months on end, to how it is today. I would echo everything that Rabbi Felzenberg said regarding the accommodation side. As far as the anti-Semitism, so I'm someone who experienced it twice, once very early with a supervisor in my career and once near the end of it with a commander. I can tell you that as a graduate from the University of California, Berkeley, I experienced far more anti-Semitism as a college student that I experienced in the Air Force. And I say that only to say that I think there are people who have misguided ideas in all walks of life. And to think that you would never come across an individual like that in the military, is absurd. People are people. But as an institution goes, as a system goes, I found that there was almost always a desire to do the right thing. But sometimes the system didn't necessarily know what the right thing was. I was part of the investigation group that was put together when allegations of anti-Semitism and proselytizing were made at the Air Force Academy in the year 2005. And my experience was, unfortunately, Jewish groups try to frame all of these types of instances as anti-Semitism. And they weren't, and it wasn't there either. There can be administrative things that are outdated. There can be systemic flaws that are because the world is changing, and sometimes the world changes faster than the military, than the bureaucracy or Title X in the government change. But that doesn't mean it's anti-Semitic. It just means that it gets pushed up to the forefront, and then you address it. I always found it a privilege to serve in the military. I was deployed with the Army. I was deployed with the Navy. I spent a little bit of time with the Marines, but not to the same extent as the other two. And obviously, a few years of deployments with the Air Force. And without reservation, I can say there's no systemic anti-Semitism. It's the opposite. Systemically, they want to do the right thing. Systemically, they want to help people be who they are as much as possible. It's gotten so much better now than, say, it was in 1982, as an example, which is where I really first started. Prior to that, I can't speak, but the instances that I had where I said an anti-Semitic individual in my chain of command back in the early days, such an individual wouldn't be tolerated today if it came to light. And I don't necessarily know that it came to light then either, because I, for one, didn't say anything. So I can't fault the system then. I can just simply say that there are, I see a question just came up. Am I referring to Mickey Weinstein? Mickey Weinstein once referred to me as the token court Jew for my ideas. In fact, I think that's how he refers to me in a book that he wrote. So yeah, he and I have a different take and a different understanding on things. And I did interview his son, as a matter of fact, and suggested maybe he talked to his son at one point. But I don't want to go into all of that. That's sort of focusing in on the negative. It was a very positive experience for me. It was very enheartening. And as I said, I dare say that our Jewish college students today, what they go through on university campuses throughout the country, that is something that could be labeled anti-Semitic. That is something that could be scary, unnerving, because unlike those colleges, when the military it tries to address something like this, they really do a good job by comparison. I'm not quite articulating it the way I want to say. I don't want to necessarily duplicate what Rabbi Felzenberg said, but I would just, every Jewish person who I know found the military supportive in one way or another of their needs. It's just Jewish needs are not always the same. I'm sure everybody on this call looks at Yiddishkeit just a little bit differently and has different individual needs. But when we look at it from a macro perspective, systemically, I would say systemically, the system is there to help us serve others.
There's a comment, an affirmation comment of on the chat bar from a young Marine who's currently in active service. It says that on the side of kosher availability, my unit gave me commuted rations instead of meal card. And when going to the field, they made sure to get me La Briute kosher MREs, even without him asking. We're coming up towards the top of the hour, so I want to honor any other additional questions.
There's a question that you skipped over there about the proselytizing.
So the question about any experience of proselytizing, what is it? Chaplain Oxman did cover that to a degree regarding with the Air Force, but we'd love to hear any additional comments.
Sure. So from an Army standpoint, generally, and there is a range as to how you define proselytizing, evangelizing, different things are not the same. But generally, the Army is quite careful. There were points where different posts sometimes will have folks come on and approach people, but that was addressed as they occur. And I would say that I know the Army chaplaincy does not look at proselytizing as a way to go. Chaplains who engage in such are kept in check or disciplined accordingly. The goal ultimately is to ensure free exercise, to help support people as they find their way personally, religiously, spiritually, and to give them the tools they need rather than, of course, just, as it were, I hate to use the term, dupe someone or just lure someone into a faith other than their own. It is one thing, of course, doing proper outreach where, case in point, a Jewish chaplain is downrange to do Jewish ministry for the holidays, seeking out the Jewish service members and providing to strengthen the faith of one's own people with a faith that they themselves identify with. That's just good outreach practice. But I hope that answered the question.
Thank
You
you.
know, it may have answered the question. I'm curious. Rabbi Oxman mentioned Mikey Weinstein, I think. And the issue there, of course, is proselytizing, but not from the chaplaincy, but proselytizing from military leadership.
So, I mean, he was a big feature in the investigation I was at, and I met with most of the commanders, et cetera. There's a difference between making a mistake and actively proselytizing. Was I proselytizing by wearing a yarmulke? Think about it. How is the fact that the nexus of evangelical Protestant observance seemed to have been Colorado Springs, and those churches and those faith communities were constantly providing for the cadets at the Air Force Academy, the Protestants, but very little is being done by the Jewish community to support the Jewish cadets or the Roman Catholic Church to support the Roman Catholic cadets. Does that mean that they're proselytizing because they had so many exciting, wonderful things going on for the Protestants and others wanted to go join them? I didn't look at that as proselytizing. I found there, and in most cases where I was asked to look into proselytization, the people that complain, it's not that it's because they didn't have. If they had for themselves, pardon me, that's God. If they had for themselves, they wouldn't have been bothered for the other. The complaints usually were a reflection of what they didn't have. And I would also add that there is a difference between evangelical or evangelizing and proselytizing, and it's a difference that's often lost in the non-Jewish or rather in the Jewish world, certainly, and lots of parts of the non-Jewish world. Proselytizing, no. Are you going to deny an evangelical Christian the ability to even speak and be excited about his or her faith? And again, how is that any different than me walking around wearing a kippah or eating some of those wonderful kosher MREs that were eventually caught up to me later in my career and that made Pesach so easy, and places in Iraq and Afghanistan and Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Well, proselytizing, especially the food half the time was better than what people were eating around us. I would say there was not, despite the fact that there are some very big names within the Jewish world today who talk about the problem of proselytizing. I didn't see it. I usually saw it more than often than not as a lack of faith communities providing for their own, much more so than a proselytizing issue.
Thank you.
Thank you for going into the greater length. Stan, you had another question?
No, he covered it. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. I'm watching our time and I want to be respectful for our hour time here. I certainly want to mention there are additional recordings available on YouTube. We hope to add more and more as we go along the way here. But this evening, I want to express great gratitude to again acknowledge the presence and participation of all the members here, but certainly again to Colonel Felzenberg and to Colonel Oxman for joining us this evening and adding your insights. I'd also like to point out we have a special guest amongst us this evening, which is Jeff Sachs, who is currently the national commander of the Jewish American Veterans. And I'd like to offer him a moment to say hello and to put in a plug for our JWV.
Just another Maccabee on this conversation, buddy. Thank you.
So again, I want to thank everyone for your participation, and I want to make sure we give special brachas for all those who need a refuah shlema, and may the lights of Chanukah bring blessings upon all of us for physical health, mental health, emotional health, spiritual health, financial health, intellectual health, and safety across the board. L'chaim levracha.
Okay.
Rabbi Felzenberg, would you honor us with a closing thought?
Sure. So just one point of Hanukkah, just a reminder, at least by Chabad tradition, Hanukkah Gelt is usually given either on the fourth or more ideally even the fifth night. So tonight is the fifth night of Hanukkah. One of the reasons why it's the fifth night is because calendar-wise, the way it syncs, the fifth night of Hanukkah can never fall on Shabbos, ever. So inherently, there's that little bit of a lacking or darkness with the day. But indeed, the lesson is that there is some special divine blessing of the fifth day that despite it not being able to coincide with the Holy Sabbath, it's able to stand alone on its own despite that. And thus it is on this day that many in Chabad have the custom that we give our Hanukkah Gelt. So in light with that custom, if you have not given Hanukkah Gelt to someone, lean over, give it to him tonight, or if you see him tomorrow, fulfill that custom. But it just is my fervent prayer, as I had said before, that those who serve wherever they are in uniform be safe and guarded by his divine hand and under his sheltering wing of protection. And for all those in front of me who've served and who participated, especially in tonight, who were able to partake and share some Hanukkah fellowship, may you all be blessed. May you be thanked for your service, and not just by your fellow man or by your neighbor, but by the one above for having served and put your lives on the line, given of your time, given of your efforts, given of your wisdom, even as I think we know, service members are not the most highly paid demographic. So you have even sacrificed financially, endured the hardships of frequent moves. I don't need to list all the sacrifices that service members can make throughout their career. So thank you to each and every one of you, and to those who do serve today. We ask God's blessing upon them all and upon our great nation. God bless America. Go Army.
Amen. Hoorah.
Next weekend.
Oh,
Is that a prayer for next weekend?
I'll tell you. Rabbi Oxman may not like me after next weekend, but we'll see. So.
Why do they always play on Shabbat too?
It is what it is. So
I'd like to say thank you to Chaplain Grossman for setting this up.
Thank you.
I never got around. The sticks for the.
Toda Rabba.
Do that.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
but that means you have,
And I'm sure the Rebbitzin sitting off to his left, our right, is the real driving force. So, and indeed, I think Rabbi Oxman can attest to the fact that our Army, Air Force, Navy, etc. spouses and families are the ones who really deserve the credit. You know, it's one thing to wear the uniform, collect the paycheck, get to, you know, travel, see the world, and like I said before, experience being able to support service members. It's another thing just to sit back at the home base, whether on post or off post, and care for the family as a single parent for months on end, to give up that partnership, to give up that support, and for the children who go many, many months. Just to think, I mean, in my case, I've been away for 34 months total. That's almost 3 years that my children didn't have a father hands-on present. I was at best, I mean, you know, now we do everything. It's all WhatsApp on a screen. It was not that same level of technology back in 2004. And so for the many kids who, you know, are without one parent for a substantial time, and those who are dual military, who sometimes might even, in some odd cases, be without both parents, the sacrifice is just not able to be rightly articulated. So again, for Rebbitzin Grossman and or all the spouses out there, my own wife included, and Rebbitzin Oxman, just a shout out to the military families, because they are the ones on whose back our freedoms are protected. We just go through the motions.
I want to take advantage of the moment and share a moment of nachas. On this call in bright marine red is my son Yankee, currently stationed in Pendleton. And I think Colonel Felzenberg, the last time you saw him was back at the Pentagon, right?
Indeed so, yes.
A few years ago.
Yeah.
Shepping nachas from Yankee, and our son Levi just started basic military training for the Air Force this past week.
Wow.
December 7th. And yeah, we also have another son who's in the service in a different way, service of Chabad, Shliach in North Dakota. So we can kind of say all three sons, Shepping nachas in very, very different ways, and very thankful for the service of our servicemen.
And Yona's looking out for the folks at Minot.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, again for joining this evening. Greatly appreciate
Happy
it.
Hanukkah.
Thank you, Colonel
Happy
Felsenberg.
happy Hanukkah to everybody.
Thank you so
Sameach.
much. Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Thanks, Samantha.